Hello, my name's Quentin, and this is my cat, Lucy, and we're here today to read to you episode 5 of the book Pip and Kitten and the End of the World, written by David Congreve. Shall we begin? Are you going to lie down? Thank you very much. The crow considered Pip with eyes so black and shiny that he could almost see his own scared reflection in them. In Pip's experience, birds usually flew away when you so much as looked at them. This meant they were timid creatures, or so he thought. But this crow seemed far from nervous. The only anxious being in this exchange was the 8-year-old boy with the knocking knees. The crow was sitting directly outside Pip's front door, almost as if he were guarding the boy's safe haven. A memory surfaced in Pip's mind of a nature documentary he'd seen about carrion birds who ate the rotting carcasses of dead animals, but in some instances would attack small or sickly animals. Unfortunately, the surfacing of this memory caused Pip to involuntarily cough. It was a noise that was exactly how Pip imagined a creature would sound if it was only hours from expiring. The crow perked up its head and bobbed excitedly on the spot. Pip held his breath, determined not to give any more suggestions that he might be weak and easy pickings, regardless of how true he suspected those descriptions to be. He plucked up the courage to take a couple of bold steps closer to the crow, hoping this would scare it away, but it responded even more daringly, hopping toward him and letting out a noisy, croaky caw. People have a tendency, when describing a situation after the fact, to use exaggerated language, especially when writing about an event. For instance, they might describe someone who looked vaguely annoyed as fuming. Or if someone's stomach growled and they expressed an interest in the sausage roll, they are said to have been starving. I bring this to your attention so that when you read the next line, you will understand that contrary to this trend, your humble narrator is endeavouring to be as accurate as possible with no intention of hyperbole. Pip freaked. He let out an involuntary shriek that was embarrassingly high-pitched. It was so shrill and anguished that, if Kitten had heard it, she would have placed a second paw over her eyes. This was followed by an urgent need to visit the bathroom, and the narrow avoidance of a nasty accident only by an act of supreme will. Pip turned on his heels and ran down the street as fast as his short legs could carry him. He screamed for help no more than twice before realising he needed his breath to keep up his speed. He reached the corner of the street and rounded it without breaking stride. His turn was so sharp that his battered trainers, which hadn't seen a decent tread for months, skidded on the wet flagstones, and Pip went down hard on his side, banging his kneecap on a sharp edge. The adrenaline prevented him from experiencing any pain, and he scrambled quickly to his feet to continue his flight. Down the edge of his street, round another corner, and along the back of the houses where the gardens were located. Pip reached his own gate. Aunt Cribbage kept it locked, but this was a pointless act, since half of the fence posts were missing, so he ducked under some overgrown bushes and plunged into the garden. He passed the old refrigerator, that he was still unaware had saved his life, the washing line held up by a rusty prop, the vegetable patch that had never seen a vegetable, and the water butt that was overflowing, contributing to a thick growth of moss around its base. He lunged at the door handle, tugging on it violently, only to discover the door was locked. Pip's momentum came to an abrupt halt as his body slammed against the unyielding PVC. Gasping from the impact, and aware of a burning sensation in his left knee, where there was now a hole in his trousers, Pip spun around and pressed up against the door, looking around wildly. He peered left and right, and even up this time, half expecting the black-feathered fiend to come swooping out of the sky like some kind of Hitchcockian nightmare. When the winged attack didn't take place, Pip turned back to the door and began banging on it. "Let me in! Let me in!" Pip only remembered there was nobody in the house to open up when Kitten poked her head through the cat flap and looked up at him with bleary eyes. "Kitten, go back inside. There's a giant crow out here." Kitten perked up. She'd never met a bird that was too big to chase, and while a crow was nearing the limits of her avian-killing capabilities, she felt up to the challenge. A breakfast of tinned stewing steak and a pleasant nap had given Kitten the bravado to attempt to slaughter an entire murder of crows. She bounded the rest of the way through the cat flap and sniffed the air eagerly, hoping to catch the scent of oily feathers. But it soon became clear that there were no birds, or indeed anything warm and chaseable, in the vicinity. Kitten looked at Pip with the same expression that a child might use after being promised chocolate cake, and instead handed a bowl of sprouts. Kitten decided the only appropriate course of action was to go back inside and find something to break or spill. She disappeared back through the cat flap. Where are you going? She disappeared back through the cat flap, much to Pip's relief, but his repose was only momentary, as his knee began throbbing painfully, and he remembered that he was still on the wrong side of the door. He jiggled the door handle again, a futile gesture that only served to reinforce his growing sense of despair over the fact that he was going to have to go back to the front of the house. She's back. Pip decided to go the long way, up the road that ran behind the houses, around the corner, and along to the far end of his street. Maybe, he thought, approaching his front door from the opposite direction would allow him to reach his house without the crow spotting him. He peeked first when he reached the top of the street, and even from this distance it was clear the crow had moved from outside his door. Pip tiptoed toward his house, hugging the walls of the houses and breathing as quietly as possible. At the point when he was only 50 yards away from safety, a pigeon on a nearby roof flapped its wings. It was a subtle noise, but it sent another surge of terror through Pip's soul. He abandoned his stealthy approach and began sprinting as fast as his wounded knee could manage. Gasping for air from his exertions, Pip arrived at his front door and threw himself at it. Once again his body slammed up against an immovable object, solid wood this time as opposed to PVC. In fairness, Pip's predicament of being locked out of his own house would have occurred whether or not the crow had decided to pay him a visit. The latch had snapped closed the moment Pip let the door shut behind him. This was not a problem caused by ornithophobia, but merely by his lack of experience of living alone. Even knowing it was futile, Pip couldn't resist wrestling with the door handle. When his prediction of not being able to open the door came to pass, Pip turned around and checked his surroundings. There was still no sign of the crow, but Pip just knew that it was there, somewhere, watching him, waiting until he showed a sign of weakness, waiting until he looked poorly enough to swoop down and start pecking at his eyes. Oh dear. Poor Pip. What a state to be in. That was the end of episode 5 of Pip and Kitten and the End of the World by David Congreve. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe so you don't miss episode 6 of Pip and Kitten and the End of the World. If you want to find out more, please visit pipandkitten.com. And if you go to Amazon and search for Pip and Kitten and the End of the World, you'll be able to buy a book just like this one, or get a digital copy for your Kindle or other device. Lucy, who's gone that way, and I both hope that you enjoyed episode 5. We will be back very soon with episode 6. Until then, bye for now.